Alina, this book is something else. She's saying, she's saying that the things that, that stand out to you, the things that you want to repeat and all of these things into your life. Listen, everything
stands out.
So I break it down into portions that I can manage.
This really was transformative.
Good evening and welcome to the Club Conversations, Series 6. We're launched by consultancy, joining in with Vision Work Solutions, bringing conversations about Mike Murdock's writing on the Uncommon Achiever. My name is Alina, and I am so happy to have Simone Nickham back in virtual studio with me.
Hi.
And of course, we have joining in the conversation via audio only, Roll Rollox, our partner in conversation as well, impact strategist at VisionWorks. Hey, Roll.
Hello. Good evening, everyone.
Nice. Yes. So I'm so happy. Can I tell you, as the intro was playing, I was feeling, when you go to dinner and you have the full course meal and you're coming to the end of the main course just before dessert, I was thinking in the context of the book, I'm getting full. Yes, I am feeling the effects of coming to the end of the book because we have gone through so much content in this book. We are on day number 29. And even as we focus on Mike Murdock's writing tonight, we're talking about viewing the variation in personalities as a necessary ingredient for personal success. So definitely, I'm sure there's going to be a lot to unpack. And as I love to do, I want to start off with the big question, which is, what was your takeaway? What were the things that stood out most to you in the chapter? Simone, as you're on screen, let me start with you.
Hi, and good evening, Alina, and good evening to all our Uncommon Achievers. I feel like we're family now because, Alina, like you said when the intro was playing, you got all these butterflies or excitement because we're so full. When it happened to me while I was getting ready, even before that, you really felt the excitement for the book, The Uncommon Achiever. A lot of takeaways for me personally from this chapter, viewing the variation in personalities as a necessary ingredient for your personal success. And I think this has been the journey that I have been on because throughout my life, I have looked at different people I would have worked with, I would have come into contact with, I would have been in school with, somebody I would have met at the grocery. And I'm able to zero in on attributes that I see in them that I admire. And as they say, imitation is the highest form of flattery. So once I see something positive, I tend to, like a magnet, be drawn to it. But the question you asked, what stood out to me in the chapter? And it's a long one, but I'll share it. Mike Murdock spoke about the uncommon achiever being willing to listen to others. Everyone sees through different eyes, he went on to say. They feel with different hearts. Isn't that like all of us? They hear through different ears. Someone knows something that you should know. You will not discover it until you take the time to stop and hear them out. So when Mike Murdock advocated, and I felt I heard his passion when he was talking about this, the importance of understanding that we can learn from persons of varying personalities, encouraging us to not just stick with people who might be just like we are. And for me, when I read that, I reflected on how I grew in terms of my attitude and the soft skills that I needed in the workplace, but also just in connecting with persons. And I was in a weekly meeting, I remember, and I was ready to jump in, because you're all about business. We got to get this done. This is a weekly meeting. You want results. And I remember one of the persons at the meeting addressing another colleague who was representing IT. And he started with, hey, like, let's say her name was Alina. Hey, Alina, how you going? How you doing? And you could tell there was a mellowness from her. Not that she wasn't mellow usually, but there was a relaxed response. And that paved the way for the rest of the meeting. And after the meeting, he said, oh gosh, they have so much on their plate. You just can't jump in. You have to warm up a bit before you start engaging them. And that was a tick box for me. So I learned that day from his personality. When mine was ready to just jump into the meeting, his personality taught me something, that it's important that we take the time to step into someone else's shoes and walk around in it to gain perspective on how to build quality relationships. So after that, I started to incorporate that in how I would communicate with persons, whether it's a meeting or not. I start with a warm greeting. And that's one of the things that, why I connected with this part of what Mike Murdock says. Someone knows something that I should know.
Yeah, definitely. Roel, what about you? When you consider, your readings from chapter 29, what would have stood out most for you?
A couple things, I don't know how to rank them. But the first one I want to start with is a little controversial, right? I want to be a little controversial to begin with, right? It's the very, very first line. Greatness is everywhere. I want to challenge that a little bit, right? Because the first thing that came to mind is, what is greatness? I don't know if we've defined it in our session. What does greatness really mean? And I take it, some would say that greatness is relative. It depends on who's trying to define greatness or what's greatness. But I know for me, it certainly speaks to striving for the best version of yourself, right? And I won't know what the best version of yourself is, but we all need to strive for that best version of ourselves, right? If I use that definition, I don't know that greatness is everywhere. No, maybe greatness is anywhere, right? But I don't know that greatness is everywhere. In other words, you can find greatness anywhere. You can find greatness among um, uh, persons of your very highest estate. You can find it among persons of the lowest estate. You can find it in different professions, right? But I don't know that it's everywhere. I don't know that everyone or most people, and we could debate this, have really determined that they want to be great, that greatness is important to them, that greatness is a value. You understand? Now, people want great things, but I don't know that we've all committed. I don't know if we've all made that commitment. And commitment speaks about an action. Commitment speaks about, doing whatever it takes. Commitment speaks about going all in. I don't know that that is everywhere, in that sense. So that's the first thing I would like to throw out, maybe for discussion, maybe to hear from the other uncommon achievers who's listening. And how do they define greatness? And is greatness really everywhere?
You had a second point, Roel. I said that was one of your first
Oh,
points, one of the
I had,
first things that stood out.
I had several points. The other thing that jumped out at me, because this chapter talks about being able to honor everyone. you know everyone brings something to the table. We all have different skills and talents and things that we can offer. And it had me thinking about that the last discussion we had on weaknesses, right? And trying to define what a weakness is, or what we determine to be a weakness. And, you know, as I sat thinking about it, I wonder if it's really a weakness, Now, let's say I may not be as articulate as someone else. Um, but because I may not be as articulate, it may force me to listen more, you know. So what and even if we use something like health, or abilities, and I know Alina, I'm wading into your waters here with education, when you come across some autistic children or persons that people would say have certain disabilities, in some ways they are like geniuses, so that the other that thought came to my mind as we would think, as the chapter addressed the whole issue of the variation of personalities that we have, and that it's a necessary ingredient for success, because I've always held to the fact that we need to be teachable and we can learn from anyone, and we should always be ready and willing to learn a lesson from anyone, where no matter where that lesson comes from. So those are some initial thoughts that I had.
Yeah, definitely. Because even as you reflected their role and the whole concept of weakness, and I think we spoke about it earlier, where we took time to maybe understand weakness from the perspective of the limiting factor, the things that keep you from really fulfilling your goals, the things that keep you back from maximizing an opportunity, and not just a weakness because we classify a particular experience as being weak. Because sometimes a weakness could actually be a strength, or a weakness, quote unquote, could be very useful. And so it changes our perspective, because it reminds me of a story I heard many years ago at a youth conference of sorts. And the motivational person was sharing the story about the bucket, and the farmer that had the two buckets that he would leave the house every day, and when he leaves the house to go to the river to fill water, one of the buckets had a crack. And the two buckets would be talking to each other, and the bucket without the crack would be telling the bucket with the crack, "Oh, look, you have a crack, you are no good. I don't know why the farmer don't throw you away." And in the end, the farmer saw the cracked bucket feeling sad. Of course, it's highly metaphorical, right? Saw the cracked bucket feeling sad. And the bucket said, "I don't think you should use me anymore because I have a crack and I keep wasting your water." So he took both buckets back to the path that he travels every morning to go fill the water from the river. And he says, "Look on the left and look at the right. And what do you notice?" And they say on the left, it was just stones and rubbles. And on the right, there were these hedges that had grown. And the farmer was saying, "I knew you had a crack, and that was the reason why I used you. That was the reason why I value you so much. Because instead of me having to go back and water the hedges to grow the flowers that I wanted to grow, your crack allowed me to get water and water my flowers all at the same time." So the crack was useful. And so sometimes, to me, that story reminds us that perspective is important. So, one person might not be very detailed oriented, but you might be highly conceptual in how you approach things. One person, might have a very calm personality, but then another person might be the one to bring the excitement. But then the person with the calm personality is able to maybe keep the conversation on track and flowing. And everyone has a thing about them that makes us valuable, that makes us worthwhile to be paired with and to be grouped with and to be teamed with, because we're able to bring the difference of experiences. But you know what? I wanted you all to allow me to poke you, because I wanted to give voice to frustration. Because it's easy to look at the chapter and see all the nice mushy things that the perspectives that we could glean. But as I was reading, I also took time to think about it in the opposite. So I'll give you an example. Mike Murdock says people have different contributions. And he said, you need different kinds of input in your life. And so here, Mike Murdock is giving value to the fact that people have different contributions. And as I was reading it, I visualized a meeting in chaos, a meeting, as we were saying, bacchanal, because why you had to watch it so, and I don't feel it should do so, and I think this, but I saw it this way. But because we have different contributions. So I want to ask you whether at work or in your personal space, how do you manage dealing with people with different contributions, whether because of personality, experience, perspective, or otherwise? How do you manage people who come with these different contributions so we could stay in the lane of positive and not veer off into the lane of conflict? Because certainly it's easy to get into conflict when you have these different perspectives. So how do you navigate that? I want to leave it open floor. Simone, Roll, talk to me.
Wow. I think people generally can be emotional and passionate. It's just part of our nature, and it helps us to be able to identify where our strengths are and what we like. So, for me, if something I have learned, right? If something is going down a road that is uncomfortable or unhealthy or rambunctious like that, I try to listen in with an objective ear and focus on what the issue is that we want to resolve or agree on. And it often requires filtering out the noise in the communication, meaning you have to filter out, somebody's tone maybe or their body language, and really tune into, okay, what is the point they're making? And for me, I will try to understand, okay, well, why do you see it that way? I think what is important at that time is how I would respond to them. Because if you are fiery and I am fiery, or if I am fiery and you are fiery, that could just be adding fire to fire. But if a person would stop, take a breath, manage your tone and your body language, say it with a smile, to try to understand the other person's perspective, I think that goes a very long way in getting the meeting back on and into perspective. I also have learned, I had a HOD who, she was always so very cool and focused on what the issue was, so that she per se wouldn't get very emotional. She had a lot of emotional intelligence, but she wouldn't get so emotional that she lose objectivity. And I remember one time we wanted to have a team building exercise, and one of the units within the department, they because you had the option to attend or not, we weren't sure if they would come and join. And we would discuss one on one, we'd talk with them. And then one day at a meeting, we said, well, what if they still don't come? And she very calmly said, well, we have to respect other person's views. It's open. We would love to have them there. But if it is, they choose not to, well, we have to accept that. So I think even in a time where people may be frenzied, they may be emotional about something, we have to pull back, be objective, manage our tone, and still understand that a person may just have that personality, and we would have to manage our expectation of the outcome or their contribution.
Definitely. Roll, any contribution from you about how you manage differing personalities and contributions so that you veer away from being absorbed in conflict, but rather stay to having a positive experience when dealing with these varying personalities and contributions that come up both professionally and or personally.
Everything that Simone just said, right? I agree with everything she just said. Because you really need to filter, you know. A lot of times you have to manage your own emotional response, you know. So it really takes emotional intelligence, you know, in the situation or situations. What I will add is that for me, it helps by knowing that everyone has value. Sometimes you have to search for that value. Sometimes you have to mine it like gold. You have to literally mine it because it may not be apparent. And what helps me with that is to make the distinction between character and personality. And I mean, in my short experience in life, you know, I've seen that, you know, sometimes someone may be very rambunctious or maybe in your face, but really they have a heart of gold. And someone may have a very nice, what we call perfect personality, and they may be a sly fox. You understand? So it helps me to separate because sometimes we tend to confuse the two, character and personality. So someone may have a personality we don't like, but they may be the most genuine person. They may be the person that's telling you the truth. Whereas the person who's doing it in the personality you like may be lying to you. You understand? May not be forthright enough with you. May be telling you something they feel you want to hear. So that helps me to just level the playing field and approach people as people and say, listen, you have something that's valuable. Let me focus in on that rather than trying to make a judgment in my mind about you. So that opens me up. And again, you know, I'll go back to my favorite quotation. I think I say this every night, and I know you all know what I'm going to say. Covey says, seek first to understand, then be understood. You understand? If you want to gain power in a situation or influence over another, try taking some time to understand them and then connect with them based upon that understanding. And we have a great example in the life of Mandela, and it's an example that always catches my attention and causes me to think and meditate upon it. Man, if you remember Mandela's situation, being in prison at the time he was in prison, and having to relate to the security guards and all those persons in the prison, right? Mandela took time to understand the Africans, you call them, or Afrikaners, you know, the white people in South Africa. In fact, he got to know them. He got there. He understood their culture, the history. He understood the language. In fact, there was a time when he had to teach a prisoner, help them with the language, because he got to know and he was able to empathize. This served to be the bridge that he used to connect with the politicians, because politicians started visiting him and he would say to them, you remember in 19 so forth when you all went through this, you remember when you went through this, you remember when the Dutch had you in this situation. And he was able to connect and say, well, this is where we are now as a black people. That's how we build the bridge. Now, if he didn't take time to understand, he would not have been able to connect. And I think that helps me as well, taking that time to understand the other so I could connect with them, so I can learn, so that we can have a productive relationship.
Yeah. One of the ways for me I am able to manage different contributions and personalities is I stay in a place of reminding myself, Alina, what it is you want out of this conversation. What is it that you want out of this relationship? And who are you? Those are three things in my mind are always churning, especially when you come, because it could feel pretty intense sometimes, when you get in, because not everybody going in trying to figure out how to make it positive. So it could feel a little intense sometimes. But I ask myself, what is it that you want to get out of this conversation or this meeting? And I tell you, there are many meetings that I have to facilitate that before I enter physically, virtually, I have to resolve that in my mind. Because I mean, if we're to be honest, we know that, sometimes we're going into meetings and we know it's going to be contentious for whatever reason, that the people coming in, they're coming in ready with guns loaded. And the only way you're getting out of that unscathed is you have to go in. I, at least, am going in with a very clear understanding of what I want at the end. What is it that I want to achieve? So you find even in cases where I know people coming in with guns blazing because whatever the reason is, a lot of times they leave smiling. And I remember even from a work perspective, the clerks in the office, they would shake their head because somebody might come in and they riled up for whatever the reason. And by the time they leave, everybody kiki kaka laughing, all right, ting, we'll see you, all right, take care. But when they came, it wasn't like that. And it's not that I I I wouldn't say it's charisma. I would say, because some people call it charisma, but it's not really charisma, because if I don't go into the meeting with a very clear understanding that, okay, this is a challenge, this is what we have to work through, and this is what I want to get out of it, then it could be easy to get caught up in the attitudes, in the tone of voice, like Simone you mentioned, and all of the other things that surround it. But when you're really clear on what it is we want to get out of it, what do we want to establish in the end, even in our relationships, there are certain things I just don't pursue when it comes to relationships, personal relationships, like conversations, or maybe the way I handle issues. Because I'm like, listen, if I go down the road and handle it like this, XYZ is what's going to happen, then I still have to turn around and figure it out. Why put myself through that? Rather, if I know at the end of the day, your relationship matters to me, then I'm going into it willing to work it out, which means that I now am positioned to want to listen, even though maybe what you might say might be harsh or difficult or intimidating or whatever other negative word we could think about. I'm going in with the intention to listen. I'm going in with the intention to recognize that my view may not be on point. I may have to make an adjustment, and I have to choose to be okay with that, because I don't need to be right. So even if I'm not in the right, it's okay. And even if I am right, but I need to tone it down, and I say tone it down, I mean, choose to take that humble route to say, you know what? I want to honor the way you feel. So this is how we're going to make it work. And that's okay too. Both perspectives are fine. So for me, I keep driven with what is it that I want to achieve in the end? What do I want to happen at the end of the conversation, or what I want to experience in this relationship? And that allows me to encourage myself to have the patience, the understanding, and the willingness that is needed to stay in that positive vein, or to find the positive vein no matter how difficult things may seem. But I want to take a minute and share a comment. We have Paula back in with us. Hey Paula, Achiever
Hey,
Paula,
Paula.
girlfriend Paula. We have her back in with us. And Paula says, I think by initially setting ground rules before a meeting keeps things on course. Everyone must agree to the ground rules. And definitely, I think that could be so helpful. And would even complement that by saying, in addition to the idea of ground rules, I also take time to explain sometimes what's my position. Like when I have, even in work meetings, I get into meetings, let's say I'm doing academic consultation. Usually within the first 5 minutes of that meeting, I say to the interested parent, allow me to take a minute and tell you, I'm not here to convince you of anything. My job is to listen to your concerns, share my professional view, explain to you how our institute supports learners, and give you information for decision making. I'm not here to convince you to register, because if you make that decision, when you make that decision, you mustn't do it off of Miss Lewis's personality. You must do it because you have the information that tells you that the school is able to give the best fit for dealing with the individual learning needs of the child. I create a precursor right there. So then when we get into the discussions, there's a perspective on, okay, what's she coming with? You know, we talked the other day about hidden agendas. So it's nice. And even as Paula said that, we set the ground rules and we establish. Simone, you're looking like a bubbling girl. Talk to me now.
Oh gosh. You know, sometimes it's rare. It's rare, but it's real. You just meet a toxic person. And when I say toxic, good night, Paula. Always nice to hear your contributions. You need to be on this side though. Sometimes you meet a person who their personality is just very toxic. And you really have to deconstruct in your mind what I have had to do when that has happened to me. I have to remember, you know what? This person is a person of value created by God. And there is something that is honorable about this person that I can connect with. John Maxwell has a saying, it's called the 101 principle. Find the one thing you can connect on and give it 100%. Well, I could find the one thing, but you see that 100%, it really depends on me because real talk, sometimes when you meet such a person, there's an energy that comes from them that affects the atmosphere and the environment, you know. So if they're in a room, it could be the other persons in the room, they're also, you know, like on edge, or it seems so kind of volatile and flammable. So it takes a little extra sometimes because as much as you may want to share the ground rules and as much as you say, you know, we need to treat everyone with respect and honor, sometimes if you have someone there that is not on the same page, it can be very challenging. And there's a lot of commentary and articles on it. So it means that I, as an individual, I want to know feedback from persons that I work with. Is there something, the way I say something or the way I approach something that maybe didn't fall right? Because you don't want that someone interprets you as the toxic person or the trouble person or all of that. So while I'm saying, yes, I need to manage how I would treat with someone who might be toxic or always not on the same page, I also don't want to find that I myself slip, so that I want persons around me to be able to say, hey, Simone, how are you talking so today? I have an off day, bad hair day, whatever it may be. And I think that two-way stream is very important because we're all dealing with each other. We all have different gifts, different hearts. We hear things differently, just as Mike Murdock said.
Definitely. Roll, any contributions that you would want to share?
Well, I think, it's about framing too. Sometimes in some situations we go in with a frame, and that frame influences how we handle the interaction. So
Yes.
sometimes I think it's important to, before we go in, to reframe it. And we've been discussing some of that. So for example, how we see them as a person, how we value what they have to say, what's going to come out of it. We have to reframe it from the perspective of win-win. There's a very good example used with the sharing of an orange. So, we could be fighting over an orange and we don't realize it's one orange and we both want the orange. But with some discussion, with some honest discussion, with some trying to find out what the other is really interested in, we may find out that we really don't have a fight over the orange. One person wants orange peel tea and the other person wants orange juice. So that same orange, it's a win-win situation. So it's not like if I have the orange, it means you can't have the orange. We lose. You understand? Somebody has to win and someone has to lose. So I think sometimes reframing conversations, reframing the approach helps. And, so that's what I'll add to that.
Sure, thank you. I want to ask an interesting question. Mike Murdock said, one piece of information can turn a failure into success. Great decisions are the products of great thoughts. And my question to you is, how do you define a great thought? Because I'm looking at it and I'm thinking about someone maybe being introduced to this line of thinking for the first time, and they may be sitting and reflecting at all the people that try to give them advice, and they have to figure it out who to listen to, who not to listen to, all this kind of thing. So that, but they want to make great decisions. So how does one identify what is a great thought? What makes a thought a great thought, so they could know to embody it, so that they could then in turn make great decisions? And I'm going to leave the floor open for this one.
You're kind of teasing on my the question I opened with about what is greatness. Yeah, I would think that a great thought, if we're going to differentiate it from a normal thought, from an ordinary thought, maybe an uncommon thought, will have to be a game changer. So it could be something that makes such a difference, or can make all the difference, almost something that gives leverage. It can make all the difference in terms of pivoting and changing someone's life. So you could be going in one direction and you get this great thought and it takes you in another trajectory. I think it could be that. I think sometimes a great thought could be timely. Just the time at which the thought came, it was exactly what you needed to hear, what you needed to be exposed to. It didn't change, it didn't make a big change in your life, but you needed to hear that. Whether it could be, so a great thought could be comforting, a great thought could be encouraging, a great thought could be motivational. So I think the timeliness of it, I think the impact that it has, are all elements of what makes a great thought.
Yeah. Simone, what are your thoughts on this?
I think a great thought is one that would make me think about it even more, even further, to delve into it, to look at it from different angles, to get some perspective from where I am through it, because it's a different lens that I'm being encouraged or challenged to look into. And looking into it makes you probably challenge the thoughts originally that you had, or grow the thought, or decide, okay, then what should I do? And it probably leads you to more thought that will have you wanting to search out the value from in it. So I'm really trying to think of what thought did I come across that was a changer for me. I remember someone sharing with me when at a point in time, I love to talk. I love sharing. I think when I learn, I grow, and I'm always ready to share what I've learned, because I felt like a lot of the things that I learned, I had to learn it as a spectator. I didn't have someone who would have mentored me, who said, what do you want to do with this? Or do you know this or that? So a lot of these things that I've learned and developed that became a skill, and persons would say, how come you do this one, how come you do that? So I'm always ready to share with other people. And because I'm like that, I also like to ask questions to understand better, so that I can contribute with more value. And it came a time when I realized persons thought she asks too much questions. She always have to ask a question. And eventually I would tell myself, if I'm going into a meeting, Don't ask any questions. Remember, do not say anything. It smothered me and it smothered who I am. And one day, in speaking to a person that I looked up to, she said, "No, that's exactly why we want you to be a part of this committee, to be a part of this board, because you ask the questions other people don't." And in that moment, I realized, Simone, this is your gift. It's a gift from God. I just needed to know where to take this gift, because this gift is not to be shared with everyone. So I was really glad that she shared that thought with me, because had she kept it within her, you know, I would not have benefited from it. And where I have shared after that would not have benefited from it either. So that's one thought that I know it was a game changer for me. And it even propelled me further to develop my Create Your Own Narrative workshop to encourage persons not to allow what other people's opinion of them is to stop them from walking in their purpose and leading a life of passion and excitement.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that, guys. So even as we weigh to the end of the chapter, I want to sort of open the floor for closing thoughts as we usually do. Roll, what takeaways or thoughts for moving forward would you possibly like to share with those who are viewing the broadcast as based on this chapter, of course?
Well, what comes to me is not really a new thought. It's a great thought, but it's an old thought. It's a thought that we raised before. And I think it helps me to treat with managing the various personalities that come into my life, you know. I first start with the premise that nobody comes into my life by accident, right? It could be a mechanic, it could be a carpenter, it could be a politician, it could be a doctor, it could be a lawyer, it could be a cousin, it could be an uncle. No one comes into my life by accident. So from that perspective, I see these individuals as being assigned. You know, one of the things I've always had a challenge with sometimes, when you're meeting someone, we have all these quick pleasantries. Hey, how you going? And if somebody asks me how you're going, I want to answer. But before you realize that they're not going to really wait on for the answer. So you just give something for them to go with. You understand? But I think a lot of these moments that we call fleeting moments are very important. So if you come into my space, I I believe that you've been sent. You understand? And that you're in my space for a reason. So there's something that I need from you. It doesn't matter to me the status in life, how many mistakes you made in life, how whatever you think about yourself, it doesn't matter to me. You're in my space for a reason and a season, and I have to get from you that treasure. So I see myself in that way like a treasure hunter. I'm constantly looking for the treasures hidden in the people that I get exposed to, no matter who they are. You understand? I'm looking for that treasure. There's something that you have for me, and I want it. And that's my attitude to dealing with different personality, especially ones that are way different, to how I am and the way that I would relate to stuff and my perspectives. So I'm always excited to get a new perspective. I'm always excited to to understand something that I didn't know before, because I believe I can incorporate that understanding into my life, make me richer, make my life more fulfilling, and help me on my way to that uncommon achievement. So I'll share that, as my
Thank
closing thought.
you. Thank you, Roll. Simone, what closing thoughts would you like to share?
There's a statement Mike Murdock made, and he said, "Successful people treasure worthy friendships." And I think every one of us, we treasure being in a space where we are accepted, being around people that accept us. But I think for the uncommon achiever, it goes a step further because you take time to reserve a space for worthy friendships. And even though you don't see this friend for a week or a month, when you connect, it's so smooth. You go from 0 to 100 from the time you say, hey. And I think the common denominator for having and treasuring a worthy friendship is when that friendship is based on respect, honor, care, love, and appreciation that is reciprocated. So it's two-way. And one of the things I would like to encourage all of us as uncommon achievers is to remember our worthy friendships. And don't wait on a birthday or New Year's or Christmas to decide you're going to reach out. As you feel that, as you remember, we can just say hi, hope you have a great day, treasure those worthy friendships, and share something about how you appreciate that other person, because in you doing it, it gives you a sense of fulfillment and energy so that it helps you in your journey as well as an uncommon achiever.
Thank you so much. And I want to close by reminding persons and using Mike Murdock's words, think of everyone around you as a potential problem solver for your life. And I really believe if we were to do this, it would make managing those personalities and managing those different opinions and different relationship experiences that we encounter so much easier because we understand there's a solution in the people that we are interacting with. Achievers, have a good night. We're winding down, guys. Day 30 is tomorrow. Hoo-hoo. We have 2 more days to go. So keep on joining. Make sure you've liked and subscribed to the channel. And please share the conversation with a friend or a colleague. And until tomorrow, have a great night and stay on course in your journey to being that uncommon achiever.
Good night.